Well, as soon as I started beekeeping, these old-time beekeepers, well, bee sting's good for arthritis. Well, here as a youngster, 15, 20, And of course, at that age, you're a wise guy, and these old-timers are a bunch of nuts. And there was a neighbor had some bees, and I used to watch them going in and out the hives. And I was very much interested in what they were doing. And so I thought the best way to find out was to buy some bees. So I was about 14 when I bought my first hives of bees.
14?
That was, just after the war, 1919. And 1934, January of 34, for some unknown reason, I don't know why, I was hit with rheumatic fever.
So how old were you then?
I was 28.
And you got rheumatic fever?
Yeah. And it was a very severe case. In fact, it was so severe, and I was in such pain that I never slept for even 1 second for 2 weeks steady.
Now, Charlie, we're on film here, so you have to refrain from telling tall tales.
I know it. I started working with the bees again, and I gradually got better. And I was in pretty good shape, except for my knees. They still hurt. And I was getting stung in the hands and the face all the time. And but wearing trousers, I never got stung on the legs. And one day I was caging some queens. I was shipping some queens somewhere. And I had the bees, and I was putting them in the queen cages. And I looked at my knees, and I wonder if there's anything that damn nonsense bee sting is good for arthritis. I was getting desperate. I was even ready to try bee sting.
Yeah.
So I put a sting right on that knee and right on that knee and left the stings and promptly forgot about it. I was getting stung every day and all day, so
sure.
2 stings, so what? And forgot all about it. And I went to bed that night as naturally, I was convinced, the psychological effect?
Yeah.
I was convinced that that was utter nonsense.
You were convinced that bee stings were nonsense, and maybe there's a placebo, but it's...
Maybe. And so I got up that next morning, and I stood up. No more pain than I have right now.
And that was a few years ago.
That was 1934. Now, you understand, medically, that was a spontaneous remission, right? Being a doctor, isn't that right?
Mind-body connection, placebo, you could call it all sorts of things, but as far as you're concerned, the pain went away.
Pain went away. And being a temporary remission, it was going to come back, right? Well, this happened in 1934. It is now 1993. 60 years spontaneous remission. I don't mind that at all. And I don't think any arthritic would mind it. Oh, gee, I treated a lot of people. There are a lot of examples, and I never kept records, and it's so hard to remember them all. But I think one of the most dramatic was this one friend of ours was boarding an old Yankee named Mert Curtis. I knew nothing about bee venom therapy. All I did was give him bee stings. No, except I suppose I gave him in his knees where he had his trouble. And then I didn't see him for a while, and I saw these friends of mine, and they said, say, Mert's walking again. I says, what? He's walking. What do you mean he's walking? He hasn't walked for 7 years. How in the hell can he be walking again? Well, I don't know that he's walking anyway. So I went over to see Mert, and he was no longer in his wheelchair. He was now in a rocking chair. And so I said to him, we visited, and I said, Mert, I said, how did you get the idea you could walk again? Well, if you haven't walked for 7 years, what gives you the idea you can walk? Well, in his old Yankee dialect, wow, I was sitting here in my chair, and I looked at that door over there, And I says to myself, says I, that door ain't so far away. So I just got up and I walked through it. I'll never forget that.
That was after about how long of treating him?
Oh, a couple months maybe. Not more than that, I don't think. But that expression of his is something I never forgot, because you see it every day today. You know, have an arthritic? Well, MS, same damn thing. Arthritic. And they are helpless. But after I gave them the bee stings, that door ain't so far away. Before that door was 1,000,000 miles. It affects them mentally in that way, that they feel that they can do things again. They feel good about being able to walk. They know they can walk.
Well, you know, that's interesting, Charlie, because one of the components of bee venom is serotonin,
Yeah.
which is actually used as an antidepressant. So maybe what happens is initially you get an antidepressant effect with some of these people, and then they feel empowered to try something.
Well, of course, just as Dr. Weissman of New York University Hospital, famous rheumatologist, said when he tried bee venom on adjuvant arthritis in rats and saw its, you know, very dramatic anti-arthritic effects, and of course everybody said, oh, it, you know, stimulates the cortisol production. And I remember him saying, that's only one thing that happens. There's so many things going on in there, we have no idea what they are. And I'll never forget that, and how true that is. 1935 was the next year that I heard about Dr. Beck. And of course, at that time, I was getting so enthusiastic with bee venom, I followed every damn lead I could find. And so I went to see him. And he lived right in Manhattan, between Lexington and Madison Avenue, about 56th Street or somewhere in there, one of those apartment houses. He had a hive of bees right in his office, going out into the courtyard and flying out to Central Park. And he had a door on the top of the hive where he picked up the bees and treated people. And so I went to see him. And you know,
So this is a medical doctor
a medical doctor,
in New York City
New York City,
with a hive of bees in his window in his office?
in his office. He was a surgeon doctor, trained in Hungary, I guess. And like all Hungarians, and he studied medicine in Austria and Germany, and then finally came to the US. In Europe, there were many medical doctors into bee venom at that time, before World War II.
Okay.
Austria and Hungary, Germany were full of doctors doing bee venom therapy. And there were quite a number of them, and Dr. Beck was one, and he's the one that started in the US. And as you can well imagine, he had a terrific amount of opposition. He was crucified one end to the other. But in his favor, of course, is he had such excellent results and cured so many people that he was able to keep the thing going.
Yeah.
And he tried, so hard to promote bee venom therapy, and the opposition just was too much.
Amid the gas rationing and chaos of World War II, Charlie's collaboration with Dr. Beck was broken, and when Beck died during the war, his library papers and records disappeared.
And then, of course, there was Dr. Carey in Los Angeles. Now, I knew of Dr. Carey in LA through Dr. Beck. And I remember going out there to meet Dr. Carey one day. And he was the one that, see, I got started trying to collecting bee venom, making injectable bee venom.
Charlie invented a technique for collecting pure bee venom, which set a worldwide standard. He perfected a method which enabled him to provide Dr. Carey and all the other researchers with a free, clean, dependable supply.
He spent many years developing this technique.
About 30, 40 years ago.
And the technique is to have the bees sting through a
Rubber dam, yeah.
rubber dam, and then the venom is collected on the inside.
On the inside, away from all the gunk and the feces and the honey and the pollen and all the dirt that goes along with it. And See, the only thing that penetrates that rubber dam is the sting, and the venom exudes from the sting. So there's no possibility of anything going through that rubber dam except the bee sting.
The Champlain Valley apiary honey business is now run by one of Charlie's sons, who himself is in his 60s. But over the years, Charlie often invented important devices for the bee industry whenever he saw a need for them. His fume board, for example, revolutionized beekeeping and is used by virtually every beekeeper around the world. His contributions to beekeeping have been acknowledged internationally by the Federation of Beekeepers.
The picture I'm getting is that you go ahead and you make these inventions, but you don't give a hoot for any of the money coming from them.
No, I think that's silly.
Before Charlie set the world standards for bee venom, companies making allergens for treating people allergic to bee stings used whole bee body extracts.
If you wanted a bee venom, you took a whole mess of bees and you crushed them, squeezed out the gut juice, and dried it, and that was supposed to be bee venom.
Well, that's actually what happened in the 30s and 40s in this country. They were injecting bee venom, and they were calling it bee venom, but it wasn't venom. It was ground up bees.
That's why Beck and Dr. Carey wouldn't touch this stuff.
Yeah.
They tried it, and it was useless. A couple of doctors at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Lawrence Lichtenstein and Dr. Martin Valentine, were concerned about this. They put on a demonstration with 100 people that were allergic to bee stings or other insect stings, and using these whole body extract solutions, and they found that it was no more effective than isotonic saline, distilled water.
As a result of this demonstration, the FDA gave permission to use pure bee venom as the standard allergen, but they had no standards for identifying it.
So when the government wanted to know what venom was, they came to Charlie Mraz.
Yeah.
And you've been really setting the standard for pure bee venom ever since.
Yeah.
So medical researchers use your venom in their, the French government wants your venom, the Korean government's using your venom.
These different phases of therapy that I've experienced over the past 60 years really covers quite a tremendous field of activity.
Serious research into the arthritic healing properties of bee venom was made possible from 1972 to 1979 by the generosity of Glenn B. Warren at the Walter Reed Army Hospital. Warren suffered from severe hereditary arthritis and donated close to $250,000 to research a cure for arthritis.
And so when he heard about me and my work with bee venom, and I was collecting bee venom, he arranged for me to get down to meet the people down at Walter Reed. And one of the researchers down at Walter Reed, well, two of them, really, two main ones, were Jürgen von Bredow and Jim Vick, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Vick.
Lieutenant Colonel Vick studied the effects of bee venom treatment on arthritic dogs, while the more conservative Major Jürgen von Bredow teamed up with the Navy's Dr. William H. Shipman of California.
His daughter Jeannie had a horse named Star, and it developed ring bone.
Which is the horse arthritis.
Horse arthritis in the front foot. Shoot it, dispose of it, get rid of it. Well, Jeannie, his little daughter of 6 or 7 or whatever she was, they were not going to kill her horse. So I gave him some venom, and Bill started injecting Star. The horse made a complete recovery. He said he drove it up and down the hills around San Francisco, and he's a big man. He had never even a limp. And of course, Star lived to be old age.
Those studies are published in the literature. They made it into good scientific journals.
Yeah.
Shipman's work went into Nature, which is a top scientific journal.
Yeah. Oh,
Vick,
he was
von
a
Bredow, they're all well published. The medical profession didn't really pay attention to it.
No.
And then you got the top researcher, the guy who developed the test for arthritis, Gerald Wiseman, with his adjuvant arthritis model.
And rats, yeah.
And his research was paid for by the Glenn B. Warren Foundation. And what happened in that story? How come when the top researcher comes out and says there's something to it, nothing develops?
Dr. Wiseman tested it. He told me that the results were so dramatic, far beyond any arthritic drug he ever tested. And he didn't believe his research. You know, something's wrong. So he repeated it. The same damn effect. He still didn't believe it. He did it a third time. Same results. And finally he went to Jim Vick. He said, Jim, are you sure that bee venom works like that? And Jim Vick said, of course. That's what we've been trying to tell you all these years.
Based on these preliminary findings, Dr. Weissman promised Glenn Warren and Charlie to do full clinical studies with bee venom in his arthritis clinic the following year when time was available.
And of course, he was testing drugs, anti-arthritic drugs for all the big drug companies. Because you had to realize that arthritis, as a disease, produces tremendous amount of revenue, both for the medical and drug industry.
A year later, when he never heard back from Dr. Weissman, Glenn Warren called and was told,
Oh, I'm sorry, Glenn, we're not interested in bee venom anymore. We don't intend to do any research. Well, that was quite a shock to Glenn Warren, and quite a shock to me. And Glenn and I looked at each other, and we knew immediately what happened. What controls sponsorships of drugs or treatments or healing in the medical industry is financial return. It didn't take the drug industry long to realize that patenting a drug or a medicine or medication like bee venom was like trying to take a patent out on water. The drug industry pays an awful lot of money for medical research, and if you recommend bee venom therapy, you sure are not cooperating with drug companies. Look at this beta interferon racket just starting now, for instance. These people with multiple sclerosis, they know there's nothing that can help them, yet their drug industry is coming out with this very potentially dangerous drug as a treatment for, they don't even call it a cure, just a treatment.
I'm Ron Charles from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. We've come down to do an interview with Charlie Mraz about this bee venom therapy and its uses for treating multiple sclerosis. There's definitely a controversy. There are doctors and there are the presidents of organizations like the Multiple Sclerosis Society, arthritis societies, who really question whether or not it works at all.
Connie, in this high-tech medical era, it's hard to imagine that an old folk remedy that some claim cures everything from the flu to headaches would be generating so much excitement. But the people who are excited are also desperate. Pat Wagner says she knows why people come here. She was diagnosed with MS in 1970. Conventional therapies were ineffective.
Can you wiggle that foot?
Only 1 year ago, Pat was in a wheelchair, her condition deteriorating rapidly.
I could have cut my legs in half and not felt it. I had no bowel or bladder control. Let's see, I was deaf in my right ear.
And being stung by bees made it all better, made everything better.
Yeah, oh boy, the energy. Fantastic energy. I just felt like within weeks I could run a Boston Marathon. I mean, I still couldn't walk.
The concept of bee venom therapy has been around for centuries, but you can trace much of the recent buzz over this controversial treatment to this patch of land in Middlebury, Vermont, to these 20 beehives, to an 89-year-old beekeeper named Charles Mraz. He began working with MS patients in 1986.
We started off slowly, and I worked up to 20 stings each visit 3 times a week.
One of Charlie Mraz's first MS patients was Madeline Tenney. And after approximately 2 years of the bee venom therapy,
Right.
you feel great.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel you're cured?
I don't want to say that I'm cured. I am symptom-free right now. I do everything that I ever did before.
She needs bees.
Today?
Yeah.
But despite all the testimonials to the benefits of bee stings, the medical establishment remains unconvinced.
Bee venom therapy is an unproven treatment for multiple sclerosis.
Dr. Stephen Reingold of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society.
People may claim benefit, but it is only anecdote on an individual basis. We lack the clinical data to support a positive therapeutic claim for bee venom.
They're absolutely wrong. They're absolutely wrong. They haven't done their research on this.
Vermont physician Dr. Brad Weeks heads the American Apitherapy Society, which studies the medicinal use of bee venom. They've just begun keeping records on people receiving bee sting therapy.
I think this is a winner. And I think that I'm very sad that the societies like the MS Society and the Arthritis Foundation haven't taken this up, because this is clearly, in my opinion, the most promising biologic that's come around in decades.
You would give her 20
Yeah.
bee stings?
Yeah, but Monday he gave me one.
Pat Wagner continues to receive treatments, and she's turned her living room into a kind of walk-in clinic, treating as many as 50 people in a single day. The charge? Nothing.
Joyce, what's the total count today?
32 just came in the door.
These bees are so great.
Yeah.
Why hasn't the medical community, for the most part, embraced this? I'm asking.
You poor innocent little child.
Help me out. Help me out. School me on this. Why hasn't the medical community embraced this? And that means?
Money. There's no money in bees. How in the hell are they going to make money with those things? They can't.
After the major media attention that you've been receiving from the TV and the newspapers and so forth, you've been getting hundreds of calls a day.
Sure.
And you had nobody to answer the calls except for you, and you're trying to answer calls, and you're trying to
Treat people,
and
answer letters. Well, one person and then trying to make a living at the same time, it's very difficult.
It was expensive for Marge, Charlie's wife of more than 40 years who has passed on, to schedule and feed the steady stream of desperate people who benefited from Charlie's bees.
Well, I think it'd be important, for example, to raise the money to hire someone to help you do the work you need to do.
Well, no question would be helpful, and of course, there's a limit to how much I can do.
You've been laboring away day in and day out with your own techniques, and you've developed those over the years, but we really don't know the optimal dosage. We don't know the optimal frequency. We don't know a lot of information which good research could elucidate for us. What about some of the folks that you've treated? Have you ever encouraged them to support the society so we can do the research in the future?
Well, I've tried, but I'm not a very good money raiser. I haven't got the, I don't know, the gall to ask people for money. And so I've been just working on the assumption that if I keep treating more and more people will become interested. And somewhere in these more and more people that get interested, somebody might come up with a successful way of perpetuating the work.
It's all done like with charity. I don't get any money for it.
I got the society up and running out of respect for you, because I didn't want, like so many great innovators and pioneers, a lot of their discoveries, a lot of their work fades when they fade. But I wanted to get this society going so we could gather information from you in your long experience and to keep the work going.
That, of course, is what really amazed me about you, is that you were able to do this, to actually form an Epitherapy Society that is functioning with a membership.
I remember I got started, Charlie, by going through your guest book.
Yeah.
And you'd have written down a name and a city. And I would call information on the city, and I'd say, is there a John Doe still living in Chicago? And the operator would say, yeah, there's about 12 of them. And I'd call all 12, and I'd finally find the right one, and he'd say, oh, yeah, 20 years ago I visited that guy in Vermont, and you know, I haven't had any problems since with my arthritis.
And you forgot all about it.
And so those guys, I said, well, you know, we're trying to gather some information. We're trying to collect people to form a society to keep that work going. And the first year we got 40 members, Charlie.
Huh, in that way.
And then as you kept treating people, we started to keep better records. And we went from 40 to about 120 the next year. People are renewing their memberships. And the next year, which is now, we got up to 1,200.
And your goals were completely beyond anything I've run into before.
The American Apitherapy Society. At this point, the American Apitherapy Society has as its mission to gather information about apitherapy, to organize it, and then to disseminate it free of charge to individuals who want to learn more about apitherapy.
Yeah. And then to do all this research on top of that, and even more difficult is to record and make available all this information. That's a big job in itself.
Now,
this record keeping takes more time and work than the actual treatment.
And most medical doctors, being paid to do their practice, don't have the time, the money, or the experience, the knowledge, to be able to keep records in a way which lends itself to scientific analysis.
Sure. I treat them or get them started to take the treatments, and they're on their own after that, and I have no way of following through on them.
Well, we have the National Multi-Center Apitherapy Study, which is designed to identify and then track these patients and to gather data, and so that's how I know what's happening with them. And I can tell you that there's an increasing number of medical doctors who are themselves your patients, who initially were skeptical, but are increasingly saying, empirically, I as a scientist see something happening here. And they like it, so they keep treating themselves.
Chinese medicine is very empirical. But we're already involved in Chinese medicine, and I mean, the basic feeling with Chinese medicine is that it existed before Western medicine, and therefore doesn't have anything to prove. I think the new step in apitherapy is going to be this big jump in really aligning it with a traditional medical protocol. And the closest one that fits it is really Chinese medicine.
In China, I first got acquainted with Dr. Fang Zhu in Nanjing.
In the early 1970s, fate made Dr. Feng Chu and Charlie Mraz aware of their parallel efforts on bee venom therapy, and they corresponded for almost 20 years before meeting.
Separated with a bamboo curtain for many years, we're doing the same thing at the same time, the same way, even though we never even knew each other. And which I think illustrates very strongly the universality of bee venom therapy.
Combining apitherapy with Chinese acupuncture in treatment.
Yes. It's interesting, when I started using bee venom therapy 60 years ago, just by experience, I learned to apply the bee venom to the trigger points of the body when I knew nothing about acupuncture.
They are the same points.
The same point.
Or what the Chinese call sure points, meaning points that when you press it, the person will indicate that there's pain or sensation at that point, suggesting that something, that acupuncture or bee therapy could occur at that spot. What acupuncture is saying is, let's add in additional points that address the problem energetically, according to the acupuncture model. But certainly acupuncturists are, as a profession, are the most directly suited to do the treatment. They understand acupuncture theory, point theory. They already do needling, so using bees is not difficult for them to understand or to utilize. And there are 7,000 licensed practitioners of Chinese medicine here in the United States. I don't think they'll all take up bee therapy, but I think a great number of them will.
What we have seen in China is that medical doctors, highly respected medical doctors, have picked up apitherapy and are using that on thousands of patients here in China. And yet, in America, for the most part, the beekeepers are the only ones doing it, with few exceptions, medical doctors. But for the most part, it's the beekeepers who are doing it. Yet in China, it's the medical doctors.
Before I came to China, I was told that on the shelves where people buy their drugs, that a lot of the products were made with royal jelly or honey or propolis.
Most people think the bee product is electronic.
But in traditional Chinese medicine, which you've studied, do they talk about the bee products as a serious medicine, or?
Later, the royal jelly.
Holistic medicine is actually, in many respects, more alive and well here in the United States than in China. We had that one visit to the apitherapy clinic where they were just unable to prescribe to a patient anything other than apitherapy, even though herbs or vitamins or diet or exercise may have been well indicated. I mean, it's very compartmentalized there. If you want acupuncture, you go to an acupuncture clinic. If you want herbs, you go to an herbalist. And this is the delivery system. This is the way to get the best health care to the most amount of people. The trade-off is that they're not able to really provide what we refer to as holistic medicine here in quite the way that we do it. Here, you know, we'll prescribe royal jelly plus apitherapy or vitamin C plus apitherapy, things that they're aware of, but simply their hands are tied. This is in modern China. Historically, that wasn't the case. In that respect, I think apitherapy is going to develop in a very unique way in the West. It'll be apitherapy that includes and encompasses dietary recommendations, stress management, herbal medicines, supplements in one package. And I think that's what that will be our contribution.
We saw this clinic in the hospital in Beijing. This is a relatively poor country, a lot of manpower. They're using live honeybees instead of an expensive Western drug.
Sure.
And there's been a great public response of people who want to learn about your work. Then we've had the opportunity to go abroad, and you've consulted with the French physicians at their equivalent of the NIH. Here we are in Hong Kong, and you've just come back from talking with the Chinese physicians who are doing apitherapy. It also costs money, and it could be one of the goals of the society to keep the lines of communication open around the world so we can really gather information and knowledge.
Because they're relatively poor beekeepers. You know, he doesn't eat royal jelly and pollen, you know, during the summer because they have it and they sell it. But whatever they have left over, then his family eat it in the winter.
And not just the honeybee stings, but the use of the royal jelly, the use of the pollen, the propolis, the raw honey, treatment of burns. I mean, we learned a lot in terms of what these products are used for, and that's all part of apitherapy, not just the bee stings. That work has to be researched.
Certainly does, and as you mentioned, this burn clinic in China with the amazing results you get with burns. Well, we've all known, all beekeepers have known for years, the best treatment for burns is put on liberal applications of honey.
Well, of course, honey's got the glucose oxidase, which converts to hydrogen peroxide, so you have the antiseptic and antibiotic properties, and you have a coating of the wounds to keep the oxygen out and keeps the tissue moist. It's ideal.
And also the levulose, dextrosa in the honey being assimilated immediately by the body. The cells of the burns actually seem to absorb the honey for nourishment.
Now that, for example, is that we could design a very simple test with burn tissue and honey.
Sure.
And yet that takes time and money, and it takes people who are knowledgeable and interested. The society can generate the interest in these people. We have many scientists who want to learn more about this now, who would be willing to do the research if we could supply the funding. So again, it gets back to fueling the engine with enough funds to be able to get the research done.
Sure. Well, that's always a problem, and the greatest handicap, of course, is that this research is not self-generating of funds. Selling honey at a high profit is very difficult because everybody's trying to sell it at a very low price, so you don't stand a chance. Thank you.
So here's a substance which could be
close to an ideal burn ointment, which is going for $1.50 a pound, right?
Yeah, or less.
So as I've observed your practice, and you go ahead and treat people, you don't tell them to come back.
You know, if they've got a chronic case, which is going to require a lot of treatments, I say, now this is going to take a lot more treatments than I can give you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to treat yourself, get your own supply of bees, and continue the treatments when you get home.
I know, I think I need to be stung. I know that. And I get my jar of bees and my jar, and I go out to my hive and I get some bees, and I come back in and sit at my kitchen table. I'm here and I'm just take care of myself.
So you actually design it so that you're out of the picture in a certain
Exactly,
point. You
yeah.
teach them, and then they become autonomous, and they treat themselves.
And then it's up to them after that.
To me, what autonomy is being able to take care of my own needs. That's what autonomy is. And it's pretty nice to be able to take care of your own needs.
And many of them go on and become beekeepers and treat other people. And so you've actually perpetuated, you've duplicated your efforts in that way.
Those that succeed become enthusiastic, and if they have the will or the interest, they'll continue treating others. So that's how it's so slowly growing.
And it's not a financial burden. I mean, there's just so many things, and I know I'm not taking one drug to help one thing, but at the expense of another system. You know, it actually is a tonifier for me, so it's helping many systems, and it's quite something. I encourage people. You know, an adequate clinical trial is 6 months to a year, so I encourage people to really play it out.
Now, if somebody lives 50 miles away, how are they going to come and see me 3 times a week? You're wasting your time and money. Take the bees, treat yourself right at home. You'll get just as good results, and it won't cost you anything. In other words, it's the old story of physician, heal thyself.
The word for doctor comes from the Latin ducere, which means to lead or to teach, and you're a teacher.
Yeah.
In that sense, you're a real doctor. You teach people a technique, and you teach them to become autonomous. It's like instead of giving them fish, you teach them how to fish.
Yeah, teach them to be able to help themselves.
In America, we get sold a great advertising spiel about this or that artificial drug, and the other countries, like Mexico and so forth, are left to go consult their grandmothers.
Sure.
And they, in fact, use powerful natural remedies, which is part of their cultural tradition.
The American public is always looking for that magic pill, and a person has to really learn to heal themselves. You know, they depend too much on a doctor to cure them with a pill with no effort or anything on their part. And you can't cure yourself like that. You got to make some very big sacrifices and work at it to cure yourself. There's nothing magic about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of hard work, self-discipline.